training. I guess I could have said that before or after. So I'm over at New Elected Training over in Olympia. So we will go ahead and get this meeting started. So welcome to our Monday, let me get my date right, December 5th, strategic planning meeting. It is 9:09. Sorry for the delay in us getting started. But we will go ahead and get, let the record reflect that we've got Commissioner Cook and Commissioner Friends from the conference room on Zoom, and we've got a strategic management team. And as people present, I'm going to have them introduce themselves, just since I'm not there to see who's all there. So we are going to start with Casey Evans. So Casey, if you want to go ahead and start with the contract for legal services briefing.
Okay, so this morning, is Mr. Sparber there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mike Sparber and I have been working on this project, and I don't know if the board is aware of GR 42, but GR 42 is General Rule 42. It's a court rule, and this past year, and this court rule governs all courts in the state of Washington. So it's a general rule of applicability to the courts. And so this past year, the Washington State Supreme Court adopted revised GR 42. And what it essentially does is, so currently, for indigent defendants or indigent litigants, what occurs over in Superior Court is the court administrator has a list of attorneys or attorneys that are willing to accept cases, and these are mainly not criminal cases. These, for this particular thing, because there's a contract that the public defender's office uses for. We have the public defender's office, and then the conflict office, counsel for defense, and then we also have attorneys that pick up criminal cases on a conflict basis. And so, but there are other cases like guardianship cases, Chin's petition, family law cases, where the court has an obligation to appoint attorneys to represent, defendants or litigants to assist them. And so what the court has been doing is the court doesn't pay a lot. These cases are not very profitable. They're not in high demand for attorneys in town. And so they're really almost like a pro bono type thing. The court will reach out to attorneys in town, and the attorney will say, yeah, I will agree to take these matters, and the pay is quite limited. So what the Washington Supreme Court did with this new revised GR 42 is they said, well, we have concerns. The court has concerns about Superior Courts picking their friends, essentially, that the attorneys that are getting called are attorneys that the court is familiar with, and then it's not giving equal opportunity, or it's not being equally applied across the state. Perhaps it's not, essentially it's benefiting a very few number of attorneys in town. So what the court did was they adopted this new rule, and it basically states that the Superior Court, or the court that is going to be appointing these attorneys, can't be the ones selecting the attorneys. So what that means is that the county has to have a process in place where someone else other than someone supervised by the court, aka the court administrator, picks these attorneys that are going to be appointed. So what Mr. Sparber and I and others in our team, and speaking with the court, have decided would be a good process would be for us to put out an RFP to attorneys in town, and present them with an agreement, a contract that I've drafted, and that would say that they would agree to be put on a list, essentially, so a roster. And then when the court needs individuals, the court can pick from, Mr. Sparber will be in charge of developing a roster, and which is the reason that we're here today is because Mr. Sparber needs the authority to develop a roster and compose a list of attorneys, and then we're going to be putting out the RFP. But once we have that list, then we can provide names of those attorneys to the court on an as-needed basis. And so, attorneys practice in specialty areas, and so the list will be, of course, there'll be attorneys that do also criminal conflicts, but there will be attorneys that also do, guardianship, family, juvenile, stuff like that as well. So, and then that would bring us into compliance with GR 42, the new requirements, which go into place January 1st of this next year. So I don't know if Mr. Sparber has anything else to add.
No, I think just thank you for you and your team. You guys did a wonderful job of putting this together. And I think that once the RFP goes out, we'll get a better understanding of what the pool looks like out there for attorneys. So I'm open to any questions either if you have some.
Commissioner Frank?
So what would prevent a judge from going to the list and still picking their favorites off of the list?
Well, GR 42 applies to the court, so they know that they can't, that we're going to have to either decide, and this is Sparber's department is going to have to decide, are we going to just provide people in order? A lot of counties, they number them like 1 to 100 or 1 to however many there are, and they go down the line, and then they kind of repeat, and then they go down the line again. That could be an option, or it could just be Sparber just calls around, or his team calls around and find that this is probably more likely, and find someone who's willing to take the case, because it's not, my understanding is in town it's a lot of work to try and get these attorneys to agree to take these matters.
Yeah.
Someone raising their hand. Is that Mark?
Yeah,
Hi, Mark.
it is. Thank you, Commissioner. One of the things that we noticed here, so this is brand new, but our concern was we want to make it as simple as possible for Mike so that he could just create a list and give it to the courts, as opposed to the other option is for the courts to send people to Mike's team to screen them for eligibility, and then say, yes, they meet this eligibility criteria, and here you're assigned your attorney. So we thought that the other option was probably a lot less complicated for the county departments and simple enough for the judges to follow.
Mm-hmm. And the court has to follow GR 42. So when they have the list, they'll just go down in order and pick them to be in compliance with the rule.
To me, it sounds a lot like a small works roster. So, so we've got, precedent with that. Gonna do it for attorneys.
That's what purchasing indicated as well. They're like, this is kind of like a small works roster type thing.
So what kind of authorization do you need from us? Is this a resolution, or is this just a head nod?
No, so I've drafted a resolution, and we'll get it on for the next board meeting, maybe next week. And of course, if you have more questions, if the board has more questions, we can get those answered for you. But I've drafted a resolution that essentially gives Sparber the ability to compile a list, gives him the authority to establish a roster, and also for purchasing to issue essentially in advance an RFP. We've got the RFP all prepared. For the most part, we're kind of working on some final pieces. But as soon as the board adopts the resolution, we'll be able to get that out and get attorneys who are interested on the roster.
Casey, in the room here, we're being told it will be on the 13th.
Okay, perfect.
So, Casey, one question I have is, so you were talking about other counties. So have other counties already been doing this, and we're just kind of behind in doing it?
Well, I mean, every county has sort of done something different, and it's been success. Certain programs, my understanding is, certain things that have been implemented in other counties have been good, and some have been sort of more problematic. And so we've been kind of evaluating which approach we want to take. And the law does take, I mean, this rule takes place on January 1st. So I think that we'll be able to get this thing rolling, pretty quickly here. So, Mark.
And Commissioner Cuney, let me add, this has been done in so many different ways in different counties. I've practiced as a defense attorney in probably 6 counties or so. Each one of them does it slightly different. Some go out and create an individual who then goes out and looks for these services in the community. Others have where you simply go to the judge and the judge says, yeah, okay, you can be on this list, and puts you on a list, and it's kind of all over the map. And this is I think, designed to sort of make it a little more uniform.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And how often does this actually happen? Because I mean, it just seems like between our public defender, all the attorneys that we have, how often does this really happen?
I think this would be a rotating effort, because what Mike will likely find is that he will get a list built, and as soon as it's built, it will not have enough people on it, and he'll have to continue to rotate and go through it. So that's why we set it up this way, so we can constantly get people on that list. So it's utilized a lot. Yeah, it'll be utilized significantly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Casey? Amen. Okay. Thank you very much, Casey. Appreciate it.
Of course. And it's good to see you all.
Thank you, Casey.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see Jeff, but I see Arian at the back of the room. So next up is Jeff McMorris, and Arian has our community engagement, ARP and broadband.
Aaron's going to start with broadband.
Good morning, commissioners. I'd like to pass out, and my apologies, Commissioner Cuney. I will send right away the digital version of what we spoke about last week. This is a revisit to what we talked about last Friday. First and foremost, thank you for your input and your consideration, really, on the board construct for this new public development authority that would oversee broadband. From last week, we have had a revision, and I'll just walk through this really quickly. Commissioner Cuney, your version is coming right now, and it matches the discussion from last week. All of the components of the executive summary have stayed the same, with the exception of what I'll be going over with the board construct. All 3 of the commissioners, along with some insights from some external stakeholders, really challenged us to look at this body as closer to an economic development PDA, although it still is a services PDA. So it is a unique space, but in as such, elects really do play a role in the ongoing leadership. And to be quite frank, it's because of the role that you as the elects have had on our effort, although informal to date, that we have been truly light speed in our project or our progress among our county peers. With that said, the board membership at present is going to be potentially revised for your consideration and approval for the formation resolution to include 1 Spokane County Commissioner, the Spokane County Chief Executive Officer, the Spokane County Public Works Director, 1 representative that might be either staff or elect from towns and cities having recorded populations under 50,000 who are in an ILA agreement with the PDA, and 1 representative from cities that are of recorded population over 50,000, also in an ILA agreement with the PDA. So this is the 1 adjustment from last week. We have estimates here over $1 billion in the next 2 to 3 years coming into Washington State, and assuring that our elects have awareness and that the county maintains a real solid presence on this PD is really important. And from your inputs, I really feel that this accomplishes just that. So I'd like to turn it over to the board for consideration or direction to proceed with the resolution for next week.
Board members, board of county commissioners.
So that board of county commissioner role will be selected by the commissioners themselves. It doesn't.
Majority.
Yeah,
Similar to other boards and commissions.
Just to be clear, so E, so that is, it's not one per city over 50,000, it's what, so today, Spokane Valley, they together will select theirs? Okay.
Probably involve mud wrestling or something.
Yeah.
there'll be tickets for that, yeah.
Tickets.
Fundraiser.
Yeah, it just seemed like when hearing that we were talking with Joe, I can never pronounce Joe's name properly, last name.
Poirier.
Poirier. You know, he's definitely working with a lot of other areas and stuff, and definitely, you know, the connections right now with the state, not across all the counties, because all kinds of experiences now that just seem like if we took electeds off who have really been helping drive the conversation discussion, it's a missing link we would have. And broadband is very different than what Shrek is at this point in time. And this seemed more to fall in line with economic development activities. So that was part of the thoughts and the changes that came about in the conversation on Friday. So any concerns or comments?
No, my concerns have been addressed, so thank you.
Very good. Then I think, is that going to be on next week's agenda, Arian?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Anything
All right.
else on broadband?
We'll just be proceeding with some trademark work after the resolution. We've already reserved the domain names, and we are working on the WSU scope and budget for the NOFO that's due in January. So lots of stuff, but this is the big deal. And I just want to thank you again for your contributions. This is really remarkable work, so thank you. That's all for broadband. We can turn it over to ARP with a few resolutions. Jeff, you want to take that?
So there's 5 resolutions you'll see on consent tomorrow. 2 of them are applications that came in through ARP, but the board has chose to fund through the Mental Health 1/10 Fund. They were discussed last week. So you will see the resolution for the Adult Teen Challenge for $235,000, and you'll see a resolution for the Little Scholars Development Center for $316,550. And again, both of those are coming out of the Mental Health 1/10. You'll also see the resolution for the $10 million worth of water sewer that was discussed last week, decisions tentatively made. And so that is also on the agenda for tomorrow's consent. And again, that was for categories 5.1 through 5.18. People could apply to any water sewer infrastructure category. The other 2 resolutions you will see, one, when we were pulling together the year-to-date 10% administrative cost for TESA in the budget, we found that one of our resolutions had a Scrivener's error. So it's one resolution is simply a correction of a $20,000 typo. And we had 223 and it should have been 203. So that's one of them. And then the other, you will recall a month, 6 weeks ago, you passed a resolution saying that all of the revenue replacement dollars that came through an ARP calculation were going to be targeted toward capital improvements at county-owned facilities and technological improvements to the campus or to staff. This resolution would add all of the administrative expenses, which we call the indirects, and interest income that's come off of the ARP funds sitting in interest earning accounts to that revenue replacement. So it will add those additional funds to the same purposes as revenue replacement.
This is part of our end of the year kind of button up, really to take us through the 101 finish line that we'll be showing you next week, how it all laid out in list and infographic form. As Jeff said, what went other places to really highlight to the county what you guys have done.
So any questions on any of those 5 that are on consent tomorrow? Then if, oh, yes.
Can I just offer a little bit more on that, Commissioner? So what this will do then is similar to the revenue replacement, which hasn't been spent yet. In our fund balance, it'll actually take those amounts as they come in the general fund and put them into the committed category in our fund balance. So it will not be in the unassigned, it'll be in committed. And then it just indicates that's where, and we're actually, some of the capital plan that we reviewed with you this year shows those dollar amounts being used for these purposes. We already have some going towards IT. We have some going towards ERP replacement. So it's reflecting what's in the capital plan as well.
And with that, we're gonna throw it to Kat for a kind of ARP.
Yeah, good news. Happy to share that HUD approved our request for a directed priority allocation plan for ARP Home. And basically, since this is a one-time award from the ARP Act, I'm gonna lean into our subject matter experts on the ARP team to discuss options on how to proceed with a recommendation for the BOCC. So
That's an additional roughly 2.6 million that came through the ARP Act federally, but then came through HUD. That in one-time increase to your normal home allocation.
As a separate award.
Separate award and modified rules.
Very similar to what you did with ERA too. We get ERA, but this was ARP ERA, so we just wanted to keep it in that ARP engine so we could leverage it to its fullest.
And that's everything.
We have a question.
Yeah, Mr. French.
Yeah, so I'm assuming the focus is on housing, or is there a focus?
Yeah, home dollars are generally housing. They can go to rental assistance. Generally, they are used as part of a capital stack for an affordable housing project.
What this notice from HUD means, which is really quite a really commendation to Kat and the community services team, is there was a long list of things you could use this for, and we really narrowed in on some gaps that we had in our area: youth housing, some senior housing, those things that have been in our strategic plan, so that HUD literally gave us the pre-approval to pursue those, which is really quite a compliment of confidence to the region. So that will allow us, Commissioner, to take it to the next level of specific housing for this one-time investment, so that it can really stand out from maybe how regular home dollars are distributed.
So will these funds have to go through the same RFP process that the ARP funds do, or is this something that could be more targeted in terms of what we want to do?
Either or. So the board will have the authority to do some directed allocations as long as they meet all the criteria, or the board could choose to do an RFP or a combination thereof.
There's different rules in the Treasury ARP, and Tim Crowley, before he left, did a bit of a brain dump, and there are some instances that sole source can be used under home, as well as a modified solicitation if we go procurement. So really, that's what we'll be circling up with Kat, is the options for you to choose the best fit for this funding.
So it could go like the West Terrace, which was a direct
Sole source.
allocation with our other ARP, or the RFP that you're very familiar with.
So an organization like Habitat for Humanity, for instance,
If they have a project that meets the qualifications.
okay? Or any other nonprofit. Okay, thank you.
Jeff, when this was put into HUD to seek the clarification from them, or the request, some of that was talked about for the young adult shelter. Is that correct?
Correct, the VOA's crosswalk.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think that was part of what the look was, instead of that coming out of the other ARP dollars, it could come out of this ARP home. And so as this moved forward to HUD, that was part of the application to HUD, was the ability to use it for that purpose.
So the application from HUD did show a preference for youth housing, which you'll recall roughly a year ago, the board had tentatively committed pending finding funds to put a couple $1 million to the crosswalk shelter. So that would be one of the options that would definitely fit.
If in the event it's determined that this HUD ARP home award is a better fit, we do have the ability within that category, if funds are moved from one awardee to another, to give you some recommendations of what to do with the balance that wasn't funded by Treasury ARP. So we've got a few things to recommend to you to net the zero again.
Any other questions? Anything else on ARP?
I think that's it for us.
We'll be coming next week with the roll-up, and so that'll be a nice way to end the year.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
So the next, I've got Ashley Cameron to talk about HR. I think, Scott, is this our executive session?
Well, Commissioner, we're quite a bit ahead of schedule, actually. We were thinking we'd be running up until 10 o'clock where our budget session is, and then we'd have Mike doing a presentation on detention services. And then we could have executive session at the end of the budget hearing as well. So I guess we could move Mike up if you'd like to.
Yeah,
and then we can
I'm
hold
ready.
that since we've got 25 minutes before the budget session.
Okay.
How much time are we gonna allow to move over to and get everything set up over there?
How long?
How long do we need?
5 to 10 minutes.
We can queue them up before.
Yeah, so we don't have 25 minutes. We've got maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. How much time, Mike, do you think we can always continue the conversation too after the 10 o'clock? Should we go long?
Okay, I'm ready to go. It's a great presentation. So, good morning, commissioners. I'm going to give kind of a detention services update and cover some information. As you know, we've been working on this project for quite a while. And then also a little more robustly over the last year, we've been looking for opportunities to get the jail back to direct supervision, looking at different options that we've shared with all of you along the way. So you go to the agenda. So kind of what I'll cover this morning is what we see will be the difference in our system, the detention services system, our preliminary forecast strategy, which is one that I'll talk about using the NIC. And then funding strategy. I've done some work with Randy and his team and looking at some possible strategies for that. And then just kind of ask you guys for direction for the next steps. Next slide, please. So as you're aware, some of the challenges that we're facing is aging, failing facility out of Geiger. We're going to do the capital spend on that. One, to bring the kitchen up to date. Because the kitchen has fallen apart, we're gonna have to look for some strategy towards that, along with the capital improvements to the facilities themselves, if we decide to stay there for an extended period of time. I shared with you earlier that we did have a company come in and kind of give us an estimate on what that was gonna cost. It was gonna be in the neighborhood of about 39 million to do the upgrades to get a 5-year live out of the Geiger facility. And also, we're looking at duplication and transport along with the kitchen services. It's insufficient for the type of beds that we need because it can't truly serve as an overflow because it can only take a niche of the population out of Geiger. And the niche that we have in the jail currently is the one that's overcrowding us and causing the numbers to rise and not necessarily eligible to go out to Geiger. Along with that too is that the programming, all the programming is taking place out of Geiger. And a lot of that program is not taking place within the facility that we have because of the overcrowded conditions. And then this next bullet point, which is the staffing challenges that we keep continuing to work with. We have seen some increase on the staff. We've got another 8 that are potentially going to go through the process, and they're looking at those folks as well. We're still in the neighborhood of the high 20s, low 30s for staff vacancies. We are aware of a few more that are going to move on. You know that the jail is designed to be a direct supervision jail. We've covered this before, and that is a ratio of 1 to 46. And anytime it's over the 46 inmate on the floor, it requires 2. In order for us to get our, our supervision levels to break even, it would take a 92 folks up on the floor, so each could be supervising 46, but very rarely does because of the classification levels, gang affiliations, and several other factors that cause us not to get to those, realize those efficiencies. The proposed solution is to have more of a campus transitional housing and community corrections model that we have spoke about before. We'd want, our new design has got a kind of a radio design that allows for a 1:64 ratio, that it gives us some operational and supervision improvements and efficiencies. We want to right size it moving forward to out to 2040 and use forecasting models that get us out to that range for us to look at. It's also going to be more of a step up, step down process, whereas a caseworker will pick up the offender in booking and work on their case all the way through to the point of reentry, work alongside the probation. It's designed to throw resources at them to make them more successful in their reentry and to reduce the recidivism rates if possible. Community Correction Center will have a heavy involvement from the community. We'll bring in providers from the outside to help us to obtain those goals. And then we're also going to be looking at kind of bringing the programs back into the jail, where those that can't necessarily make it to the community correction centers will have fun programming and treatment opportunities within the new facility. Next slide. So as I just talked about, it's time for a change, and that's right now we currently look at charges for how we house our offenders. They fall into different categories based on their classification. It really doesn't address the person as an individual. We want to go to instead a model that, like I said, picks them up. The caseworkers will have them from the very beginning all the way to the point of handoff to the reentry portion of it. They'll be responsible for working on their cases. They'll be responsible for identifying resources and barriers that would potentially cause them to recidivate. As you know, right now, what we do is we make a lot of decisions at the booking area on people that we OR from the booking area. Some of these individuals go back out and duplicate crime once they're released. We're hoping that we have a model that will allow enough bedding or bed space for us to hold on to those individuals rather than releasing them and having them have their first appearance before a court. It gives us an opportunity to look at our housing contracts and perhaps do some work with those, negotiate and work with our stakeholders to better serve them and see what type of bedding needs they need. It will certainly help us with the community to have a facility that is more inviting to allow the community in rather than the environment that we have right now. Again, I covered that, equipping the justice involved with the necessary skills and resources to help reduce on recidivism. I did talk about the step up and step down model. And then the better supervision ratios is really key too, because it gives us an opportunity to gain those efficiencies with less staff in some areas. It gives us the ability to move other staff to other areas and program into things that we'd want to do. So next slide, please. So there's 3 distinct tributaries to the jail, and they all are going to be a part of my focus over the next year and working in each of the individual. On the front end, it's what the law enforcement and their policies are for cite and release, and how many of those are actually making their way to the jail. It's the prosecutor's policies that we'll have to work through as well, and who they're charging, along with their charging within the 72 hours and what that falls out looks like. The court policies, obviously the FTA and the FTCs, working with them on court processing, and some of those things will come up in the middle section. And then the fact that we serve multiple agencies and they've all got their policies and who they're booking as well is a tributary into the jail. The middle ground, which is really what drives the beds and the length of stay within the jail, is the case volume and their ability to do good case processing and move those cases through the facility. like I said, the prosecutor's charge decision in their case management, along with the public defenders. And then just the overall justice system, where it's touching many different areas that has traditionally been siloed, that will need some work to try to pull those together as a system rather than independent. And then on the back end is the sentencing practices, you know, and how that's being handled by the courts and what the obligations are for the justice involved once they do make reentry, and us being able to help with those obligations. What does the sanctions look like for bail? You know, a lot of the individuals get out, they make a slip. Does it necessarily mean a trip back to the booking area, or are there some steps that we could do on a stepped up and down process? And then it's just sound case management with wraparound services, having that case manager be involved with the individual and managing them through the point of entry to the point of reentry. So, next slide, please. The Geoforce casting model, as I talk about, this is a preliminary strategy that we're looking at. It's the same model that Dave Bennett uses. It's been recommended by the NIC. And really what it does is it looks at the jail admissions rate back as far as you can go. Back about the same distance that you're going to forecast out. So the model that we're looking at would be about 22 years in the rear, back to 2000, and then move forward. And it's based on the annual rate of admissions per 100,000. And just reviewing the data from what I've seen right now, we average in like the high 3,000s to the 4,000s, and that'd be the range that we're going to be looking at. Then from there, you look at the average daily population. We've had some good peaks and we've had some higher peaks. Right now, our peaks is trending about the 20 to 21 day mark, but we've been down through some of our work, even as low as 17 and 16 earlier on. So we've got some work to do with that. And that length of stay is directly attributed to the case processing and how quickly we're moving those cases through there, along with the sentencing practices of the judges. And then the average daily population is what we've been working on as well, and looking and reviewing the trend data. It looks like we kind of hang at about the 800s to thousands in that range. Same with admissions, have been pretty steady all along. So we think that using this model, similar to what the NIC has recommended, along with what David Bennett had used, will be a good model. And that's probably the model that we'll use moving forward. Any questions on that? And then, by the way, I did use, when I looked at it, I did look at the GMA forecast, the median, or the medium one. So if there's another one that you guys would like to use a preferred method, we can always use a different population demographics to obtain the one or the rate per 100,000. Next slide, please. To kind of give you an idea, and you can see on the graph right there, this is the bed usage by contract and non-contracted. And by that, I mean, you know, the city and everybody else that's involved. You look at the blue line, that's our medium beds, our minimum beds. You can see the usage for that. Then also the medium. And this graph right here on the gray is ones that haven't been classified yet. So we don't know which beds they would fall into. There's a period of between they go to first appearance and when they don't. You see that spike right here. This is during a period when we were doing the quarantine period. And while they were up on the floor, on those 2 floors that we earmarked for those, for COVID-19 and the quarantine, they were not classified during that period. That's why you see a spike up there. Next slide, please.
Can you go back to that, Mike?
Sure.
Or Ron?
Yes.
So I think the couple takeaways I would highlight in this one is when you look at the number of the classifications for your minimums, it's been between the 300 and 400, trending back up to 400 even prior to the COVID period. You know, it was up in the 600. That's generally your misdemeanors and maybe some of your gross misdemeanors. And then in your mediums, it's been trending between 200 and 300, and those are generally going to be your gross misdemeanors, class B, C felons sometimes.
Yeah.
And then your max, of course, is your class A felons, those your violent offenders and whatnot. But here we've got a jail, a current jail that's 462 beds that is designed for maximum, and we're averaging 50 in there. And we don't have that facility that's really more designed for our mins and mediums, which is the majority of the population of the jail. That's just the takeaway I came from this graph here.
Yeah, and just, you could somewhat look at this and say, okay, what kind of beds moving forward are gonna be the bed that we wanna use, To Scott's point, you see the maximum down here. And when you say maximum, there's misdemeanors that fall in maximums. There's all different kind of category. So it isn't just specifically about the charge. It's about, the individual, the criminal history and everything else that makes it up. But if you look at it, the jail holds 462. It looks like we have a sufficient amount of the harder cells, which is what this suggests. And maybe we, in the new design, look more for that programming and radio design, offering a direct supervision. It more tailors to that population right there. So we'll continue to track that as we move along. We'll be looking at it all year long, trying to make some decisions on that part of it. Thank you, Scott.
Mike, before you move on, I've got a question on, it was like a couple slides back that you're planning out to like 2040. Is that really long enough? That seems, because if we build a facility, whatever that is, we're not gonna have it completed here anytime soon. So, should we be looking out further, to ensure that we have it sized right? Just a question.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would go out as far as you all want me to go out, and then we would continue to use that and base it. The farther we go out, the more historical data I'll go back and get, and I've got historical data back to 2007. So we've got plenty of room, Commissioner CUNY, on that side of it if we want to bump that out a little bit farther.
Just because we know we've got a growing population and all of that, but I just, want to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Yes, ma'am. Next slide, please. So some of that on the finance side, and I will just share with you, we've been working on the plan through 21 and 22, and I know we're pressed on time, so do you want me to finish this up over next door? Is this a good stopping point to go next door, or do you want, it's up to you.
John, I'm going to look to you because you know the, what the presentation is and such.
I think so, Mike.
What's that?
I think we
Continue?
could stop here. This will be a good,
Okay, let's stop
good
here.
stopping point and pick it back up, because that'll create there'll be some conversation on this slide.
Okay, super, thank you.
Okay, so Commissioner French, thank you. If you'd run the meeting over there, I think it's harder on Zoom to know what's going on the board there. But appreciate that.
Happy to do so.
So we will then just continue this meeting. We'll take like a 15-minute, we'll break until 10 o'clock and hopefully have everything reset up over at 10 o'clock at the hearing room. And we will just continue this meeting at that point. Thank you.
It is now 10:08 on Monday, December 5th. And I'm going to call the budget hearing meeting to order. Let the record reflect that we have all three commissioners present. Commissioner CUNY is participating by remote, and Commissioner Kearns and French are in the chambers. Commissioner CUNY, could you acknowledge that you're there just for the record?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you so much. And Commissioner CUNY is traveling on county business, and so has asked that I take us through this meeting this morning and stuff. So appreciate the opportunity, Commissioner CUNY. So I'm going to go and call the meeting to order. And this is for the consideration of adopting the Spokane County budget for the year 2023 and other matters related thereto. Going to start out with a staff presentation, and Mr. Bishop and Jess, if you could join us.
Okay, Ron, next slide. So we're going to go through a summary of what we have in the budget documents that you'll be approving today. This budget, the priorities that we had when we first started this budget was for the safety of the county, the economic development, and also efficiencies in government. And then here's how the departments contributed to this. They were asked to closely review their controllable. Okay, is that better? All right. So how the county departments contributed, they were asked to closely review their controllable expenditures. They were asked to look for ways to maximize efficiency without increasing headcount. And they also submitted any requests over the prior year budget as an additional ask, and the commissioners reviewed those specifically. Next slide. Here are the agencies in the general fund. This is what is in your budget packet. This is a balanced budget. The only use of funds, the second to bottom line of $7 million, is for capital projects, most of which came from ARP revenue replacement and indirects. Other than that, this was a balanced budget, revenues and expenses for normal operations. So we did not use any fund balance to balance this budget. Next slide, please. Here is a list of all the other funds that you will be approving at this budget. You will see a couple of columns on the expense side on the far right. The first one is their annual expenses, and the next one is their continuing appropriations. These would be things such as grants or multi-year budgets. And the next slide will take you to the end of all these other funds. So these are things like your construction funds, your enterprise funds, internal service funds. So the total expenses for these funds totals a little over $650 million. The next slide, here's your FTE counts. So this year you have invested 12 additional FTE in safety and public defense, justice. Thank you. And then we have 4 FTEs in other departments, and we will go through the details of that on the next slide. So here are the 8 for public safety and justice. We have on the far right the $775,000 for next year. And is the sheriff office. We have 2 investigative analysts, 3 property crime detectives, an investigative sergeant, and a Rig 9 detective. On the top left, the $82,000 is the scraps shelter operations manager. And then underneath that, for $136,000 is for the clerk's office, where you have given them 2 additional process clerks and 1 additional court clerk. Underneath that, we go to the 4 non-law and justice positions. The first one for $96,000 is for the assessor's office. That is for the current use appraiser that they will be adding. And then under that, we have a project manager, which is for the ERP project. So that's a short-term position. We have a public records specialist and also an HR generalist. Next slide. And here are the capital projects that you have included in this year budget. So these were part of the 5-year construction of the CIP. We are only committing to the 2023 numbers in that CIP. The other 4 years, while these are what we currently know that we need, You will be addressing those next year to determine if those really are what we need the most. So we are only adopting the 2023 portion of that CIP. And so you had 600,000 for the scraps overflow, information technology upgrades for a little over $4 million. This is the ERP as we are looking at that. You have jail remodel, 900,000, and the Fair and Expo. That's the HVAC replacement. That is also coming out of the ARP revenues, along with the roof, correct? Next slide. And these are the rest of your projects that you have approved as part of this year's budget. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Any questions, Commissioner Kearns? Mr. Cooney? Okay, we're good.
That is all we have.
Very good. Okay. There's no questions from the commissioners, so at this point, I will open up the adoption process for anybody in the public that would like to provide any comment on the budget as presented. We have not received any written testimony about the budget, so if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to provide any testimony on the 2023 general fund and other operating budgets for the county, please indicate by coming to the podium. Second call for anybody who wants to provide any testimony. So also, if there's anybody on the phone that's participating, you can dial *9, or you can, if you're on the Zoom function, you can raise your hand and let us know that you want to provide any testimony. So nobody is on the Zoom that's raised their hand, and nobody has hit the *9 function. So third and final call. Seeing nobody come forward, I'm going to close the hearing and look to my fellow commissioners for direction.
Right. Mr. French, I move that the board adopt the 2023 general fund budget as presented by staff at the expenditures and continuing expenditures appropriations levels identified in the presentation. 2, adopt the 2023 designated unreserved fund balance funds, or DUFB, as presented by staff in the amounts identified in the presentation. 3, adopt all other 2023 funds as presented by staff at the annual expenditures and annual expenditure continuing appropriations levels identified in the presentations. And 4, other matters set forth in the resolution presented by staff on the 2023 budget.
I will second that motion.
So I've got a motion and a second. I have, well, any comments about the budget, Commissioner Cooney?
So I would just like to, thank the staff for working hard on the budget. And as we've, I think, stated last week, after finishing all 3 presentations, public hearings on the budget, it's just been great to have a balanced budget and to be able to move forward. And again, thank you to staff for working hard to make this happen.
Mr. Kearns?
Yeah, I will echo the comments from Commissioner Cooney. Just a big shout out to the staff for all your hard work in putting this together. It's been a long year of digging into all of these numbers, and quite frankly, to be honest, to break them down to very, very understandable presentation. The budget roundtables that you've done have been very, very easy to understand, and quite frankly, I think that lends itself to being very inviting to the public to participate as well. And so which leads me to another thanks, and that's a thanks to those who did participate, those who did show up and comment on our budget, but those who maybe watched our presentations on YouTube after the fact, or were with us live in person on Zoom. But I think the big takeaways for me on this budget is that I think we've accomplished our priorities, the goals that we set out to do. We were able to do that with this budget, providing for public safety, the sheriff's department, the shelter operations manager at Scraps, I know is going to make a big difference there on that sort of that interaction with the public and that very, very loved department of ours. But the big cherry on the top for me at the end of this is that this is a budget that does not raise taxes on our citizens, and I think that puts us in stark contrast with many of the other jurisdictions in this region, that we are going to deliver a very, very efficient, cost-effective government and the services that will meet the services that our citizens expect from us, and we're doing it without raising your taxes.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have one question, and this is, I know that you briefed me before the meeting and talked about making sure that we had in the language agency level approval in the budget. I'm just wondering, is in the motion that you read, pardon? Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we are including the language that Mr. Bishop is looking for.
Chairman French, thank you very much. That's a very good question. The motion that Commissioner Kearns made specifically references Exhibit A, which was presented to you by Mr. Bishop. And so therefore they are consistent. The agency level is defined by the two terms in item number 1 in the motion that Commissioner Kearns made. So I tried to make them so that when you looked at Exhibit A, you'd know what we were talking about. So if you want to go back to that, Mr. Valencia, is it possible to go back to Exhibit A?
Yeah, if you're comfortable that we've got it covered, I'm fine. I just want to make sure that before we took an action, that, the request from staff was being met with regard to how we wanted to handle it.
Vice Chairman French, you are correct. I have coordinated that language with the budget office, and we all feel comfortable from a legal perspective.
Great, thank you. And so I will echo the comments from my fellow commissioners with regard to the budget and the process. Very, very impressed with the process. It's understandable. The public can go through this and understand exactly what we're doing and stuff. And so for the 12 years I've been here, I've never seen a budget process end as well as this one has. So just kudos to staff for giving us a quality product to be able to adopt. The other thing I would comment on, and this is to piggyback on the comments from Commissioner Cooney and Kearns, is we are still recovering from the COVID pandemic and all of the aftermath of that, and I'm not sure that we have yet to define what the new normal is, and yet as county government, we're expected to be able to respond to whatever comes our way, and just kudos to staff because of your flexibility, your adaptability, and the ability to respond to a changing environment, and the fact that the county is, after years of conservative approach to budgeting, has got itself in a solid financial state. It positions us well to move forward and stuff. And so I just want to make sure that, one, the public understands how we've tried to adapt ourselves to this new environment, but also that staff knows that from my standpoint, I'm sure for all three of us, we really appreciate the work that you do to try and make sure that we're in a position to serve the needs of this community. So thank you. So with that, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record reflect the motion passes unanimously. And Commissioner Cooney, is it okay if we use your stamp on the documents?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And then Mr. Simmons?
I would be remiss if I didn't also thank the commissioners for your time commitment into this. We've been working with budget work sessions with you since September. So we've been fully involved for 3 months with you. You've given some really great, insightful and critical feedback for us to evaluate and contemplate within the budget for your decision-making process. So it's been a long number of months going through this, but we do appreciate all your time and energy that you've given to this, and we appreciate your comments as well. And big shout out to Tessa and Randy and Jason and Ellie too in the budget office. So thanks.
So it is now 10:25, and we will continue the meeting, but we will move back over into the Board of County Commissioners conference room. So why don't we assume that we're going to reconvene at about 10:35 at the Board of County Commissioners conference room. And Commissioner Cooney, we will not start until we make sure that we've got you on board. Okay, thank you.
Welcome back. Welcome back from our continuation of our meeting this morning. It is still December 5th. It is now 10:36, and we're reconvened. Again, let the record reflect that Commissioner French and Commissioner Kearns are in the conference room, and Commissioner Cuny is on. And so I believe, Mike Barber, we will continue with you.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Where I'd left off in our conversation was about talking about some past iterations that we had. One of them that we've been developing was through 21 and 22, which had 256 new beds, maintaining the jail, 256 community correction center, and then also a new kitchen. One that we looked at also was the model from 2014, which had 512 beds and a smaller community correction center of 96. Of course, maintaining the jail, the new kitchen, and then also it had a new booking component, which was an open booking that would be where the DEM building. Our original direction when we were looking at the both of these was to not obstruct or not to remove the DEM in our original plan, the 2021 plan. But since that, we took a look at what it would be if we actually did remove the DEM and put a new booking structure there. Proposed funding strategies are the 1/10 and 2/10 of the sales tax. I worked with the budget office to help prepare these numbers. If we were to just keep the 60%, those are the numbers that would be reflected on the 1/10 and also the 2/10. And if we were able to work with our partners and maintain 100%, those are the numbers that would be available for that.
The debts, if I may,
Yeah.
the debt supported is based on a 20-year amortization, 2 payments a year. So this is a simple, as like a bank note, 2 payments a year. Bonds may be a little bit differently than that, but this is approximately what type of debt that would support. And this does not include any increases in sales tax either. So that's just based upon that number. So you actually could probably support a little bit more, but this just gives you a conservative amount of what that annual stream will support on a 20-year basis at 5.5%.
Mr. French.
Well, I want to circle back to a comment that Commissioner Cooney made earlier, and I agree with her 100%. I'm not sure that the 2040 date is a good date to use. I think, if we were to go out at least 30 years in terms of population growth and then tie the debt service to that population growth, I think there's some logic in that, and that would also, I think, help and improve the amount of debt that you could support if you took it over 30 years instead of 20. But and the fact that you don't have any growth in here, I think, is a very conservative approach, which would, in terms of the 2/10 and keeping 100%, my suspicion is, and totally conjecture here, but the jurisdictions, especially the city of Spokane and Spokane Valley, are probably going to want to retain part of that sales tax to pay for local support. So you might want to try and see, if we were to carve out part of that money for boots on the street kind of a deal, what would that leave us for a debt service and stuff? So I think it would be an easier sell for them if they saw some relief in their general funds as well, as opposed to assuming that all of it would go into a jail. Just my observation.
Yeah, and I guess I've got a question on this one too. So, Mike, when we say the funding requirements, we're looking at the new beds. Is that the 256? Is that the community corrections beds? Then that's how many new beds we'd be adding to the system. But are we also taking Geiger out? So are we really adding? I guess that's right.
Yeah, so in the 2021 plan that we would move completely out of Geiger. And then that would allow for 256 beds that would take down the overflow or the overcrowding from the existing jail, along with those folks that don't necessarily qualify to go to the community correction center, and then the 256 at the community correction center. The other model is got more on the new beds, the medium and the minimum style beds with the radial design. It has a smaller community correction center. It's under 100. It would maintain the jail, the new kitchen, and then a new booking. And what we did is we had that escalated out to $2022. And so that's what it was escalated out to. So it really, Commissioner Cooney, what we need to do is to spend this next year doing our research, developing our forecasting models, and then come up with the correct composition of beds and style of beds that we need moving forward.
Okay, just a second, Commissioner French, just because that's my concern is that we're kind of planning this out based on the current level we're at instead of looking at what that escalation could be. Commissioner French, go ahead.
Well, and I think in a previous conversation I had with Mike Sparber, he used a term that I thought is very appropriate in this conversation. We're not just building a jail. What we're doing is we're making an investment in the criminal justice system, because this does include community corrections facility. It does include, funding opportunities for programs and things like that. So it's much more than just hard construction dollars into a jail. So it's investment in improving our criminal justice system. Is I thought a very accurate phrase.
Yeah.
Thanks, Commissioner. Just a couple things on this. We've been talking about the 1/10 or 2/10. That is referencing the public safety sales tax that is available to the commissioners right now. There's 2/10 that is available in it. And on the two scenario for sizing, it's really just, it's intended to kind of give you a range of estimates as we line up the current and forecasted growth and classifications. It will inform on, is it a 512 kind of a transitional housing medium classification and a 96 community correction center, or is it closer to the above model? Those will start to kind of pin together, and we'll be able to inform more on which of the facility sizes are going to be most appropriate, most necessary to handle current and future projections for the detention services.
Yeah, and I guess my question, just as we're thinking through this, is just that, in talking to law enforcement, some of the problems that I think, we've got the red light that's happening, and people are feeling like people aren't staying and getting the help they need before they are released again, to then, it's kind of that circular door that seems to be happening, talking to some of the law enforcement. And so, I'm excited because I think if we have people that we have the space to then provide the programming to help so they're not recidivism. I'm really excited about that, and I think that's what we need, but I want to make sure we have enough space to really do that and have those beds available for people to, to get the help, just like we're doing the stabilization center, as we're, not putting it in the jail, but we have that available to get them the help that they need, so then, they're not getting into the justice system, but knowing that there's some people that are a little more elevated that need, a little bit more than that, for us to do that, at this new facility. So I just want to make sure we have enough space to do all that.
Agreed. Yeah, and that's what the analysis will look at, Commissioner Kearney, and working through that. And I too feel that jail diversion programs are necessary, and that there's a right place for those. And I also hear the concerns from the law enforcement about booking their individual in, and then half hour later they're back out on the streets. So those are things that we're gonna have to take into consideration. It's like I go back to the model that I had shown you. There's really three tributaries that we have to address. That's the front end, who's coming in the front end, the case processing that lies in the middle, and then what we can do to better equip them for the reentry part and cut down on recidivism. So those are going to be keenly highlighted during this next year as we go through the preparation.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Quick question or a quick comment. So I do think that there's likely going to be some desire by the other municipalities to utilize their the 40% of this tax that will be allocated based on population for their law enforcement needs. And we've talked, Mike and I have met with some folks from City of Spokane, and we're going to be with Spokane Valley next week as well. And we've talked about likely the construction timeline for this and maybe the natural merge points where if it takes 4 to 5 years to build it, you can place more law enforcement officers on the street. But if we don't have a facility to house them, it's really not going to serve the purpose that the community is going to look for here. So we kind of have been chatting through do you dedicate more of this in the front end if we can come to those agreements with the cities to allow the facility to get built and funded more heavily on the front end, and then start, because I have no doubt our sheriff's department will also be needing and wanting. We saw the commissioners, what you had approved in the budget today with some additional positions in there, and that need continues to grow. So that's just an observation and a thought. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is Mike keeps reminding me of this, on the community correction facility. It's our cheapest facility. It's going to be sheetrock and studs and stuff. So where we are able to, based on the data to demonstrate it, able to build a larger facility there if it's going to, and we want to make sure it's fully utilized. We don't want to build, just say 300 beds and only be able to utilize 100 beds there. But to the extent that we can demonstrate that there's a great need over there, then it is going to drive down the cost of that particular facility because it is a cheaper facility to build. So just something to keep in mind.
Commissioner French?
Well, and you raise a good opportunity as well. If, let's say, it takes 4 years after the bond or the ballot measure is passed to actually build the facility, the other thing you can do is you can stockpile that revenue that you're generating, or that, and do a buy down on the construction costs, so that what you're actually spending is a lot less, or what you're actually financing is a lot less, because you bought down out of the front end of this thing too. So there's always that opportunity as well.
Yeah, no, which is a good opportunity. I guess one of my concerns, Scott, just in the comment that you made is that, if the cities, are using part of theirs to, for their law enforcement, the county's gonna be using all of theirs for construction costs, and we won't have that same opportunity to use it for operating. So it seems like it's putting us at a disadvantage for our citizens that, again, in the unincorporated area, from a law enforcement perspective, but we're going to take care of everyone in the county on the jail side, but forego our law enforcement opportunities, with the 0.2%. I know, which is why a bond, I think we need to just state what a bond looks like. I know it's hard to get to a 60%, but I think, just as we're putting some of these scenarios together, to just know what that would, that's different and allows them for future operating costs, because I think the facility itself too, to do all the things that we want to do, which I completely agree with, is still going to cost additional operating dollars. I think we're going to be cheaper on the operating side when we have all these wraparound services that are new services that we haven't been providing now. And those municipalities need to be helping to participate in that, because that's part of their citizens as well that are in the jail versus just unincorporated. And I know the county's, the felony, we take care of all of that, but it's still citizens across the entire county in their jurisdictions as well. So, I don't know, just some stuff that, as we're starting to talk about this, I'm just thinking through how are we really going to pay for all of this and still provide the protection our citizens, as we all heard during this last cycle, campaign cycle, they want law enforcement. So just comments. Go ahead, Mike. Oh, Commissioner Frank, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good starting point, but as we start to flesh out these budgets and stuff, it would be I think informative for our community to understand the pros and cons of both bonding it and using the sales tax, or maybe we use a combination of the two. I don't know what that might look like, but I mean, the advantage of using the sales tax is that people that visit your community also help pay for the jail. And there's got to be a way to try and carve out how much of those retail sales dollars are locally generated and how much of those are generated by visitors to the area, because I think that would be informative for folks that they look at the sales tax increase and go, oh my goodness, my sales taxes are increasing, but so are those that are visiting the community that are helping to pay for these services and stuff. So, and getting that balance, I agree with Commissioner Cooney in that, we've got not only the cost of the jail, but we've got we've got increased costs as well to keep boots on the street kind of a deal and stuff. So how do we make sure that we factor that into this equation as well?
Well, I think another thing to keep in mind when we talk about the programming and the other jurisdictions being a part of funding that, I mean, it's not going to be the same bed rate with a new facility, right? I mean, we're going to have to renegotiate. We're going to have to come up with so I mean, we're not still going to be at that, roughly $130 a night in a new facility. If there's new programming in a new facility, there's going to be a new price. I mean, it's not gonna. There's no way that can stay static.
Yeah.
So.
And I, where that lands, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I don't expect you to know what that bed night rate will be today, but we know it's going to be different.
And this is like I identified early on. This is going to be our opportunity to look at those contracts and look what's beneficial for our stakeholders and move in that direction. So that's all I have. And the question part I think we're doing right now, but kind of steps forward is what I'm looking for, and some guidance on where the board would like to go next up.
Scott, go ahead.
I heard a couple of comments earlier. So look at really a 30-year population forecast to kind of help inform on some of what the size of the facility needs to look like. I also heard, maybe I interpret this, possibly looking at a 30-year debt schedule. I'm not sure what our abilities on the bonding side are to go, 20 versus 30, so we'll have to do a little research on that one. If we were able to step something out to 30 years, that certainly gives us, it lowers the debt service and gives some flexibility to investing some of those dollars into our law enforcement. And the second part of that we'll do is, as Randy mentioned, we hadn't built in growth into sales tax. We could look at our historical 20-year growth rate of 3.9%. We could build that in, which will also then change some of the numbers on here as well. So we can look at those sort of things to help kind of inform a little bit more broadly on the discussion as well.
Thank you. I think Mike, is that enough direction for you?
Yeah, I see where we're going with that. I could go back to the drawing board too. One thing that I will bring up is that if we move forward with this, there's a large amount of education that needs to take place. And that means I'm gonna have to be out in the community like I was last time, going to the different councils, going to this. So I would probably look at some support for a communication strategy as we move forward with this as well.
And then depending on where the commissioners land, if it's the 2/10 or a bond, if it's a 2/10, the opportunities to place them on the ballot are primary or general only. I know you all know that. I just wanted to make sure it was stated it's primary or general, so it's an August or November timeframe. Can't do special ballots for this.
We'll work with Kyle too on some of the different delivery methods too, to try to wrap my brain around that and have some of that for you as well too. That's about all I have, unless there's more questions or direction from the board.
Not seeing anybody else, so thank you,
Get
Mike.
started.
Yeah.
Get busy, Mike. Okay.
So we want to schedule a groundbreaking?
No, not yet. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. So that's going to take us, I guess, is Kyle in the room? I see.
Monty is.
Monty Chamberlain is here.
Okay, very good. So Monty, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Back in October, you approved a license agreement with Fairchild Air Force Base for some monitoring wells in the county rights of way. They recently reached out to us, and their legal had informed them that with the federal code for environmental response, that actually all the fees that were in that agreement, license agreement fees, permitting fees, that they would be exempt from all of those fees. Those fees have to be waived per federal code. Our attorney, Matt Koza, reviewed it and agreed with the interpretation of the federal code. So we're in the process of creating an updated agreement, and a little bit tight window. We're trying to get it on for the 13th. So that's our goal, is to get this updated agreement on. And any questions about that? My favorite kind of briefing.
Awesome. Thanks, Monty. That was a great briefing.
Thank you.
Okay, so then Scott, that'll take us to, I apologize because I'm going off my old one because I didn't reprint since I left over the weekend. So then Ashley, Cameron, we're gonna go into executive session. Is that correct? Is there any other miscellaneous or executive session items before we?
No miscellaneous and only one no miscellaneous for me.
I was gonna say, it looks like Commissioner French may have one.
Well, so last week I was talking to one of the district court judges, and they made me aware of an opportunity that I wanted to bring back to the board. And as we look at the 13th Superior Court judge and workloads and how the state legislature has, clearly impacted Superior Court by eliminating some of those violations from the jurisdiction of the courts. One of the other opportunities, and it would require some adjustment at the state level, but would be to allow for district court to deal with evictions. Right now, the evictions are dealt with in Superior Court, and that's one of the things that's helping to backlog the courts is with COVID and all of the other things going on. And so the suggestion was that if district courts were allowed to deal with evictions, one, they have the capacity, two, they have the experience, because dealing with these kind of mediations and things are things that the courts got an experience level in. And three, it would relieve some of the pressure in Superior Court in terms of workload there and stuff. And I thought, geez, that's intriguing. I'd bring it back to the two of you and see if this is something we might want to have added to our legislative agenda for Burgess to pursue on our behalf. My suspicion is that if this is accurate in terms of how it's being shared with me, then it might also be something that Commissioner Cooney, you might want to bring to WASAC. But you know, I know that WASAC's already identified its legislative priorities, but if this is a way to help counties across the state, maybe this is an opportunity for us to embrace. I have not done the homework to understand fully the implications of this, so I'm assuming that our legal counsel can do that. But I just wanted to bring it back to you for your consideration and see if it's something that you might want to take a look at or not.
Mark, go ahead.
Sure, I can tell you that probably the reason it's a Superior Court is because it deals with real property, and real property tends to have to stay at Superior Court. However, there's no reason a district court judge can't be a judge pro tem or a judge superior commissioner in the Superior Court to hear those matters if the courts were so inclined. So
Would a state law change though, giving that authority for evictions to district court? Would that be,
I'd want to take a
could
look
it,
at
could a piece of passed by the legislature do that? Or,
Yeah, generally speaking, perhaps. Again, my concern is the Superior Court tends to deal with those matters involving real property, so that may be the problematic aspect of it.
okay,
But there is you can flip that solution and actually have one right now where if you had district court judges willing to serve as commissioners or constitutional pro tems, they can hear those matters now up in Superior Court.
okay. I'm just saying, I'm sure we could get a legislator to run that bill. I'm just wondering, does a bill that changes an RCW to give them the authority, is that good enough, or is there things more ingrained in law that would prevent that?
Let me give you a little bit more of a legal research
Okay.
on it before but I know the other is a workable solution right
Okay.
now.
All right.
Yeah, just an idea shared with me, and I thought I'd share it with the two of you. So if it's an opportunity for us, maybe it helps address a number of different issues for us.
Yeah, well, and I can see trying to go for a legislative fix, but if Mark's saying that, you know, can we talk to Superior Court and district court now to see if they would allow for that opportunity to happen now, just to get through the backlog?
I'd be game.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's Commissioner French, if you want to do that, or we want to task Scott with, you know, talking to Superior Court and District Court and getting them together to have that conversation, because anything we can do to help Superior Court's backlog would be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, when it was shared with me, I thought, geez, everybody wins in this situation, but I don't know where the downside is at, but I'm sure somebody will bring up the downside. But yeah, if Scott could reach out to him, that'd be great. Will do.
Yeah, and if are there other, do you know if there's other district courts that are wanting, you know, trying to move this forward, or was this just here?
That I don't know.
Okay. But I'm certainly, I'll add it to my discussions with Eric. Okay.
Thank you.
So if there's no other miscellaneous items, then we've got one executive session that I know to talk about performance with employee. In that executive session would be the three commissioners, Ashley Cameron, and at this point, Scott Simmons, our CEO. And those would be the only people that I think would need to be in that executive session.
Yes.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, would you mind if I added another executive session topic, a discussion of the purchase price of real estate? Just an update, not more than 10 minutes at the very most.
Okay. So 10 minutes to discuss the purchase price of real estate.
Yes.
Okay. And then the HR discussion on the performance of a public employee, Scott Hill and Anthony.
Oh, you. Hello.
Okay,
20 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so that'll take, executive session would be a half hour, 30 minutes total. And Commissioner French, who would be in attendance for your executive session?
Well, it would be obviously all three commissioners and our senior management team, and Mark McLean would be the ones that I would anticipate.
Okay, so we will start with that executive session for 10 minutes, and then we'll excuse everybody to just have the three commissioners, Ashley Cameron and Scott Simmons, in the second executive session. At that point, then we will adjourn for the day, as there's no other business. Oh,
Commissioner, we'll want to continue this because we have Mike Burgess presenting tomorrow after the commissioner's regular session.
okay. So we will be continuing this meeting to tomorrow after our 2 o'clock consent agenda. But we will not be coming back into open session today after these executive sessions. So hopefully I've stated that all properly, and we will see you all tomorrow, other than the people that will stay into the executive session. Thank you. And the time is 11:07, so it'll probably take us a couple minutes. So we'll say we'll start executive session at 11:10 and be done by 11:40.